Being sick, I just think I was cranky. The chair calls to order the Wednesday, February 8th meeting of the Planning Board. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm glad y'all remember that.
Is there anyone who is planning to speak that needs to be sworn in this evening?
Do you swear the testimony you are about to give is the truth so help you before God? Thank you.
Our first agenda item is approval of minutes dated November 9th. Looking for
I move
motion.
to approve the minutes from November 9th.
Second. Second the motion.
All right, with approval in second, we will approve the minutes dated November 9th and put those into file. Our next item on the agenda is CA 23-01. That is the City of Oldsmar Flood Ordinance Amendments and Florida Building Code Technical Amendments pertaining to the floodplain management and public hearing applicant.
Excuse me, before we go on, can we just make sure no one wants to speak for open forum?
I thought, I saw the swearing in and the two. Thank
Just
you.
an open
Okay,
forum for
yes.
anything not on tonight's agenda?
Is there anything that you would like to speak about that's not on the agenda tonight? Okay, thank you,
Thank
Kathy.
you.
So on to agenda item 2. There is a presentation.
Hello, Tatiana Childress, City of Oldsmar Planning and Redevelopment Department Director. So this is CA 2301, City of Oldsmar Flood Ordinance Amendments to Florida Building Code Technical Amendments. I also would like to introduce our floodplain coordinator, Mandy Clark, who is here today for the support. I'll start with the presentation, and then if we have any questions, Mandy and we can answer those questions.
Thank you.
So, thank you. The City of Oldsmar joined National Flood Insurance Program, which is NFIP, in 1971, and participating communities agreed to Title 44 of the Code of Federal Regulations, which specifies minimum requirements for structures protection under the NFIP. Those communities that exceed the minimum requirements are rated by FEMA in the Community Rating System, CRS, and receive flood insurance discounts. So today, City of Oldsmar is a class rating of 6 with over 2,000 verified points. Starting in 2013, as part of the high regulatory standards, the city adopted and enforced cumulative over 15-year period for projects on existing structures. So the 15-year cumulative is applicable to the existing structures that are constructed below the base flood elevation, and any improvements made on such structures shall not exceed the allowable 50% value of the structure over the period of 15 years. Improvements that exceed the 50% of the value of the structure would require that structure to comply with all of the current flood regulations and building codes. And the basic rule for structures constructed below the BFE, so if the cost of the building improvements or the cost to repair the damage exceeds 50% of the market value of the building, it must be brought up to the current floodplain management standards. Recent policy changes allowed communities with cumulative to exclude certain mitigation and energy efficient improvements to structures from cumulative when it comes to the overall improvements of the structure and determining when those structures have been substantially improved. So those will be affected or could actually take advantage of this will be in the area highlighted here by pink on this map. So this is our special flood hazard area. And anybody who's got a house in this area constructed below the base flood elevation, and since the maps changed, a lot of homes that we have in Oldsmar are actually below the BFE, so they will be all eligible to this new amendment, take advantage of this amendment. So what are those proposed amendments? Well, to provide exclusion of cost from cumulative of additional code-compliant building elements or alteration or replacement of materials or building elements whose express purpose is to the mitigation of future wind or flood damage, and also to provide exclusion of cost from cumulative of additional code-compliant energy-efficient retrofits whose express purpose is to improvements of energy efficient of the building. The following slides have examples of those items that qualify for the mitigation. So the first one is these measures include but are not limited to installation or replacement of storm shutters, as demonstrated on this slide. Next is the replacement of windows and doors with impact-resistant glass. On this map, you'll see the area where the impact-resistant windows and doors are required by current code. Also, strengthening of roof attachments or exterior walls, as demonstrated on this graphic. Again, these are just examples. It's not limited to just these measures. Strengthening of roof attachments or exterior walls, as demonstrated on this graphic. Replacing existing materials with wind and flood damage resistant materials. And some of these could be complicated, so building official at that point will have to review certain projects. Another example is the machinery and equipment installation of flood, and also installation of flood openings. So your equipment, your mechanical equipment, like your AC unit or inside you have water heaters, so those could be elevated above the BFE if they are currently below BFE, and the cost could be excluded then. And the examples of code-compliant energy efficiency retrofits include things like solar energy systems, as demonstrated here. So the request for this text amendment was reviewed, was evaluated against Section 3.13.2 Standards of Approval under the Land Development Code. The amendment complies with the comprehensive plan and advances the purpose of the Land Development Code. The proposed amendment will promote the use of mitigation and energy efficient improvements that are code compliant. This amendment will contribute to promote the community's welfare. The amendment will allow structures to be mitigated against future wind and flood events while maintaining compliance with the higher regulatory standards of the NFIP and compliance with all Florida Building Code regulations. The amendment will not grant a special privilege to an individual property owner. The code amendment will be applied uniformly and will be available to any property owner in the city willing to harden their structures or install code-compliant energy-efficient elements to those structures and mitigate against future wind and flood events in the zone that I showed on the map in the flood zone. So based on the above discussion, staff recommends approval of the flood ordinance amendment and adoption of technical amendments to the Florida Building Code pertaining to the floodplain management as proposed.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
And appreciate the full report here on all the
The
details,
amendment,
too.
yes.
Any questions of staff?
Did I understand you to say that there would be no such thing as grandfathering in this situation? In other words, everybody has to meet this code, period, no matter what. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Okay, well, what did I not, where did I go wrong?
This will be an option for you. So we have cumulative in the city. We calculate projects that you've worked on your house for the last 15 years if your house is constructed below the base flood elevation. And then next project that, for instance, you wanted to remodel your kitchen or upgrade your bathroom, but at the same time you wanted to, say, change all of your windows, exchange all of your windows in your house to the higher rating insulated windows or, for instance, wind resistant. So then the windows will be excluded from the cumulative when we calculate this. So you will not be required to do this, but this is something that is an option. This option is really helpful to those who are close to that 50% rule. So the 50% rule basically, so you have a structure that is non-conforming. You can only improve it up to the 50% of the cost of the structure, of the market value of the structure alone. So for instance, your home is 300,000. You wanted to do a project, you can only do a project which costs you 150,000. So then your kitchen remodeling and bathroom remodeling and all of the other items would cost you 140,000, and you still wanted to do the windows. And if the windows cost, say, so the entire project, say, for instance, will be 140,000, but the windows alone would be 30,000. So the 30,000 will be excluded from that cumulative when it's under 50%.
Okay. But what I thought I heard you say at the very beginning was something that made me believe that okay, all right. Years ago, 2006, we had, what, 4 or 5 hurricanes come through Florida.
2004.
2004, I'm sorry, that's right. And then in 2006, the state came up with this program called My Safe Florida Home. And we applied for a grant, and we had, the house was inspected, and we were approved for a grant. And as a result of that grant, we got a hurricane standard garage door. We got steel shutters, and we got reinforcements in the roof. Now, all of that came to, I don't remember, let's say it came to $10,000. Well, we got like a $6,000 grant or a fourth, whatever it was. So it was a big help. It was a very big help. This year, when we had hurricanes coming, my wife and I got out there and started trying to put up our shutters. Because of our age and our arthritis and all of our other aches and pains that we have and limitations that we have, we couldn't get them up. We got 2 windows covered, and that's all we could do in a whole day. And I used to put them up all around the house in a half a day myself. So I can't do it anymore. So we thought, well, maybe we ought to look at, hurricane-proof windows like you were talking about. Well, we could do that, that we wouldn't have to worry about the shutters. So we applied again. We had the inspection was done at the end of January. We got our report the other day, and the report indicated that there was a whole bunch of stuff that we had already done that was good, but they also indicated there was a whole bunch of stuff that we still needed to do. And I kept thinking, why? Because, we met all of the regulations in 2006. That's when it came out, in 2006. So, I mean, have they changed that drastically?
The codes do change.
I
yes.
understand
so
that,
they
but
changed, and they're trying to make them more restrictive as far as for the wind, or more resilient, they say, because of the prior events. So they've done studies, and I'm not a building official again, but they have reports after the hurricane reports, the studies, and they've seen like which clips work and which don't. So the Miami-Dade standards, they have higher wind standards. And when they went and they checked, okay, why is it that, siding on this house is still attached after the hurricane and this one doesn't? So they did comparative studies, and they realized that, well, one construction used certain clips in certain fixtures, additions like tie downs or whatever the name of those items, and the other didn't. So they've changed the codes, and the code was changed, the building code was changed multiple times. And prior to 2001, those codes were very, they're not strict at all here in Florida. It's after 2001 that when they started looking into the international standards, and anything constructed 2017 and beyond is, for Florida, it's a lot different than anywhere else in the United States. And again, if you compare it to the Miami-Dade standards, those are even higher. So each year you might find something like when the building revisions, they go through the plan review, you submitted something in 2017, they changed building codes in 2020. There are actually multiple revisions on the house that is not even constructed that you already need to address, or your designer will have to address to introduce newer codes. So they do update them. And wind, roof, all of those items, these are the items that they're looking right now to increase resiliency in Florida here especially. So,
Well,
and
according
each case
to-
is different too. Each house is different. So it depends when it was constructed, who was the builder. There's some homes here from 1940s that are built better than the ones that are built in 1990s. So,
Well, according to what we did in 2006, our shutters met the Miami-Dade standards, and our roof, the latches, whatever, they're buried in the concrete. The straps come up, they go over the raft and come up. They have 2 nails on this side and 1 nail on that side, and that supposedly at that time met the Miami-Dade standards. But now what I saw here, I saw this quick picture, looks like you want the rafters hooked all the way to the ground.
Point
Is-
of order. I believe that I'm hearing that there is a real need to make sure that people understand what they need to have. I believe what we're here tonight to talk about is whether or not to exclude costs should a homeowner decide to do some of
Correct.
these things to improve the security of their house during a storm. Not whether or not they need to do them.
Correct.
But whether or not, if they choose to do them, based on the report,
yes.
it would be excluded.
Excluded because
they
it's
can
an
be very
improvement.
expensive,
Yes.
and people may not do them because they don't want to have to rebuild their whole house and elevate it and do all those
Correct.
things. So my understanding is the conversation is about that, about excluding the cost, not making people do certain things or
Yes,
not.
those are just examples. The ones that the graphics that you're seeing here, those are just general examples. So a designer or a professional will have to submit those items that he believes or she believes qualifies for the exemption to the building official, and they will determine which items are included and which items are excluded. I'm demonstrating here very kind of like picturesque items like shutters, they would be excluded because that's an additional
And
item.
thank you for that, because I think the question that you posed is the same question a lot of people might have in the community about what this is.
And it
might
will be on a case by
asking the
case.
same question that you asked, so I really appreciate you going into detail and explaining that, because I think that might have been a very common question.
My
Are
turn?
are there other questions for staff about?
I have a question. Waiting my turn. Exclusion of cost. I looked it up in the law dictionary and I couldn't find what it meant. So I think you kind of explained it, but provide exclusion of cost.
From
Didn't make
cumulative,
any sense,
I
and I
think,
couldn't find what that means. So can you explain exactly what that means? It doesn't affect the 50% rule, that cost, right?
so the entire project still has to be under 50%, but it will not be counted. So so we have cumulative. Other municipalities do not have cumulative. For cumulative, we count for the period of 15 years. Other municipalities, you finish one project, you can start with another project, and it will not be counted as against, your 50%. So in this instance, it will be excluded from the 50% calculation as if you don't have the cumulative, so you can come back with that project. But as you're going through the original submittal of your entire project, it still has to be under 50, which is a little bit confusing.
That was your kitchen remodeling, window remodeling analogy that.
Yes,
that
so it will be,
explained
yes, so that will be excluded, and then you still have, we'll still have a
Everything I
little
read
bit.
after that, I couldn't remember because I didn't know what that meant.
Well,
Thank
it's
you.
exclusion
Gotcha.
From the cumulative, yes,
one
exclusion
other
of the
question.
cost from the cumulative.
We're number 6, the 20%. How do we make that better? Or is it ever can you ever?
We're trying to, so hopefully, if you recall, we adopted, last year we adopted, oh, actually, that's 2 years ago now, we adopted the flood ordinance with the new maps.
Right.
And we adopted CAS, the coastal A zone, the higher standards in the coastal A zone, similar as V. So that's 500 points, extra points. If we can get those verified, then hopefully we can be reclassified. So we're working on this right now, and Mandy Clark, our floodplain coordinator, so she's actually working with the ISO right now on our 5-year verification cycle. We're hoping that we can get a better class at the end of that verification. So it takes some time though, so because we have to verify all of the activities that we've been doing for the last 5 years. To get at least to the 2,000 points, because those are all extra that city is doing.
Because of the environmental nature of our community, we will never make number one, right?
I do not think so.
Okay, thank
I
you.
know Pinellas County is at class 3 right now, so, but they do have the whole department who deals with the
There's a lot of
floodplain
water around
administration.
Pinellas County, so they must have done something to get to a 3 from a 6.
Right,
right?
so there are certain items that are required as a prerequisite for class 4 that city is currently working as well as part of the flood, as the master plan, drainage master plan. So it's a multi-departmental, it's not just building, it's not just, it's also public works and all of the projects that are related to stormwater.
How does let's say we go from a 6 to a 5, let's say a 6 to a 4.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect a homeowner financially? Does it or doesn't it?
It will provide the reduction in insurance, and you can see on the graphic here, so the class 3 will give you under today's rating, 35% on your premium. So if you look at your premium bill for your flood insurance, you'll see CRS rating, or you see community rating. It will show 3 or 4 in there with the discount and the dollar amount next to it. So it will be a percentage rate. So if your flood insurance is $3,000, so 35% of that will be your new discount on your insurance, flood insurance.
You all need to move faster. Flood insurance just keeps going up.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Did you have questions?
Yeah, I just had questions that, if you don't mind, I'd kind of run through some scenarios by you to help me understand the way the numbers work.
The
So,
cumulative with
yeah,
the
the
50%?
cumulative. So for example, if cumulative applies and this is passed, so you're saying that currently the exclusion does not exist. The 15-year time frame exists, but the exclusion does not exist
Correct.
for these kind of improvements.
Yes. So if you wanted to put solar system on your roof today, and again, this is only for homes that are below BFE, base flood. So the first thing we'll do, we'll look at the elevation certificate. So do you have an elevation certificate? What is the elevation of your finished floor elevation in your house? So if we determine that that's below the BFE, then you're in that 15-year cumulative. Your house is subject to the 50% rule. Then we'll look at either the cost from the property appraiser website, 50% is already calculated for FEMA there, or we take your appraisal report and we'll look at the market value or depreciated value of that structure, so it should be on your appraisal. But it's technically just the market value of the structure alone. And then, so say for instance, again, it's 300,000, that's your structure cost of, the cost of your structure. So then 150 is your limit. And say you've already done maybe some improvements since 2013. So I have to mention that this was done, although we have a cumulative of 15 years, but in 2013, that's when that ordinance was in place. So we're only counting from 2013, but say you've installed, you've already done, for instance, a kitchen remodeling, and now you're trying to do like another remodeling project or a building addition, a small building addition, but at the same time you wanted to, say, replace all of the windows with the hurricane-rated windows because your windows were not originally hurricane-rated, or you just wanted to put shutters on those windows that are not hurricane-rated in the main house. So then when we see your total cost that your contractor will submit to us will be, for instance, $140,000, but your window shutters and maybe some other items that are on the list here will qualify for the exclusion from the cumulative.
So let's say you have a house with just a kind of a covering for for the car, but you want to build a garage, and it's a separate structure, does that have to comply?
So each case, each house, each property will be evaluated based on, so if you're talking about mother-in-law suite that we only allow here in CRA, or all new build has to comply to the new standards.
So because
So-
because it would be a separate structure, it has to comply, but if it's just a garage, it doesn't. If it's got a garage with the mother-in-law suite, it does. Because the garage is not finished, right? So it would-
The garage, I'm sorry, I'm confused. So this would be primarily for the main house that you have. If you have other structures that are insured under the NFIP, garage, they don't call it a garage when it's a separate garage with a mother-in-law. They call it elevated structure with the enclosure below BFE, if you wanted to have insured. If it's a true garage, then insurance NFIP doesn't play here. You just have to make sure that there's flood vents. It's a different type of, it's in a different category than what we're talking here.
So for example, let's say 15 years ago, the house was 100,000, and someone did 50,000 in improvements, so that they can't do anything else, because if they did, they would actually, at that time, they would actually have to bring everything into compliance. That's the baseline rule, right? But if that $100,000 structure today is worth 300,000, and they already spent 50, they'd be able to spend another 100, right?
So
based on that
if they had some improvements and they probably had their home probably increased in value, so we'll go by the market value today. If we have good documentation, 15 years ago, again, this was not in place. This was since 2013.
Okay.
And we started really doing the percentage type. Mandy, I don't know, since you've been probably, right? So we have charts when we document on a percentage level rather than the cost. Excuse me.
I'm asking this because if this passes, I want to be able to explain it to somebody and make sense of it, and if I don't understand it, I don't expect them to, right? So-
No, Mandy Clark, floodplain building coordinator. So the cumulative at the time that you start the project, post 2013, the clock, it'll start ticking. So you'll have, let's say, at that point in time, an appraisal or the property appraiser gives you $100,000. You have 50, and if you were to surpass that, then you would have to bring the structure into compliance with like all the current flood regulations. If not, you move on with your life, and maybe a couple years later, you have an appraisal done. And that appraisal reflects a depreciated cost of structure of, like you said, 300,000. So then you would have 50, but we have that lingering prior 50. So in reality, you would have about 100, but how we do it is by a percentage. So we could say you have used previously 99% of your 50%. So then when the next one rolls around, we look at what that percentage is. So
So even though the value went up?
even though the value went up, it's gonna say, let's say your project's now, that's another 50% of your 50%.
So if I use 90-some percent, almost the whole, like if the structure was in 2013 was $100,000 and I used 50,000 or 49,000 in improvements, and then today the structure's worth 300, they're going to use the 90% or the 99% versus the fact that today it would be 33%? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yes. This was part of the dilemma that I've kind of come across since we really a lot of our structures became non-compliant and the maps changed and we actually really started tracking it. So what initiated this was for the welfare of the citizens and them to be able to do these mitigation items, because exactly what I was running into was that I was having to tell them, oh, this is a substantial improvement because you had X amount already used previously. And so you either have to reduce the scope of what you're doing. Most of them chose not to do it at all, like you had mentioned. Because one, it's costly, but two, then that potentially doesn't leave them any room in the future to be able to even maybe maintain the structure. And I mean, it still is in line with the intent of the initial ordinance, that we're still counting the cumulative for those improvements, but not without necessarily penalizing people for wanting to harden the structures or do the energy efficient retrofits. So that's kind of what initiated this whole thing, was that was the problem. Although we're only 10 years into our 15, that's been the ongoing scenario, is even though their values have increased, they've already gone through a substantial amount of what they would have been allowed.
So they were at 98%, they couldn't do anything else because even though the value is up, then you're going by the
Or a
percentage.
very minimal, you know, very minimal cost kind of projects.
Right. So if I understand correctly, if that 90% existed prior to this revision, right? And that, let's say I came forth and I said, okay, well, I spent 98%, but it was on improvements that are exclusions based on today's,
Then that's essentially saying you have no prior cumulative.
so it would wipe that, or it would reduce it, is what you're saying.
Right, so if all I did were these hardening and mitigation, it was under my 50%, then that's essentially saying you have no prior cumulative. Like, you could turn around the next day and do another project and still have all of that you would have been allowed prior to the mitigation projects.
Does everyone understand that? Does that make sense?
I kind of think, you're talking, I think you're talking about unusual or extreme circumstances.
No, I think I'm talking about what probably prompted this coming into
Oh, well,
play, right? So-
yeah, okay. Well, but
Yeah, like I said, it was initiative because we were running into those exact scenarios. So to help provide them with an avenue to still be able to do these, still have the higher standards, so it's not affecting, our CRS ratings. We're still higher standard than what we're required to be, but having a little bit of leeway, relief for them to be more resilient, be more in line with like state legislatures where they're promoting the energy efficient, like you said, My Safe Homes Florida with the mitigation.
Thank you for explaining.
Other questions for staff? So I actually want to revisit one of the questions that you brought up just now, just to make sure, because as I was listening, it's always nice to learn things. I came in here thinking, oh, this is really simple, but actually it's not as simple as I thought based on what I've heard tonight. And I wanted to go back to what you were just saying about, I think what he was referring to is, say I did solar panels and I did these other energy efficient things that has taken a big bite out of my 50% already. Do I have somehow, if this amendment goes through, the ability to retrofit my percentage and get
Reset
a
it.
credit back for those types of items? I mean, this could be a proverbial can of worms, I think. And, you know, just to kind of take that a little bit further, you know, it sounds great that anybody that wants to do these things, it's excluded. And I think that's great to encourage people to do things that are going to make their homes safer and more energy efficient. But we definitely need to think about the people that, you know, have done these things. And, you know, is there any conversation about that, about if they are going to somehow, I know it's been 10 years, but are they going to somehow get a little percentage back? And then it was also very interesting, your question about the increase in property value versus the percentage and then the dollar. There are a lot of things I hope the city's looking at, because we want to make sure that we're equitable, you know, to all the citizens, and that some people aren't getting this discount that have redone their homes to the limit, where people that have held back because they, you know, wanted to save for a rainy day didn't do those things, and now there's this break for people that maybe have tapped out, you know, what they could spend. I don't know if I'm
You're right.
on the
You're
wrong
absolutely
track
right.
here, but this is kind of.
I think the approach is regrettably flawed, because the cost of material, the cost of building improvements have gone up substantially. So if I did improvements 5 years ago and I hit that threshold, and today my house is worth a tremendous amount more because it's just the nature of the market, and I'm already at that threshold, and the threshold is not based on the new appraised value, which I thought I heard factored in, but if you're going by percentage, then it actually hurts the person who is wanting to do improvements and prevents
Well,
them
the
from
percentage on the higher value is still a higher dollar number as well, so. And just wanted to mention that Pinellas County, they do not have cumulative. So we are having this conversation here only because City of Oldsmar decided in 2013 to go with the higher standards of 15-year cumulative. And only because a lot of our structures are, the nature of our elevations here, very low, so we wanted to elevate everybody. So we don't want people to spend a lot of money on improving some of these older homes, but at the same time, this is an option. So, and we discussed this, so there's another option is to change the cumulative. So we could change it to 10 years. That's another ordinance amendment, and we could have a workshop for this to discuss in a greater maybe room to see if it makes sense for us to maybe eliminate that cumulative or reduce it. But then some of those homes, again, they may be improved, and then we'll be dealing with the repetitive loss properties. Next time you get flooded, you know, your home gets flooded, so insurance claims, and the more insurance claims, the probably more cost to the community and the insurance. So it's all connected. It's at least this provision, when you put flood-proof or other items that are not prone to flooding, so at least when you're making these improvements, you're kind of like ensuring that your home will survive that hurricane and that flooding.
I do appreciate it. I think it's a step in the right direction. But my question was, earlier, was that if I did improvements, and those improvements historically, like, for example, let's say, like Bob, his improvements were all like shutters, right? And let's say I spent a substantial amount and I'm at 90%, and shutters or storm windows were a big part of that. Now, today, I want to do a kitchen totally inside my home, not part of anything that would be in this calculation. Would this approval allow me to reduce that percentage and reset it, because it was actually for an exempt item that is currently exempt, even though it happened 5 years
So I
ago?
believe we reached out and we said we'll not actually reset our cumulative, so should we then start counting everything from today rather than 2013? Unfortunately, the answer that we received was no, your cumulative was a higher technical standards back in 2013, so that's where you're supposed to keep track of that. So moving forward, I do believe the ordinances, the way they work is the minute you sign it in to the ordinance, that's when you can actually practice it, but not retro.
So people who were proactive 5 years ago are kind of penalized in a way.
I am not sure. They were not penalized, but if they were changing all of the windows, for instance, in their home, they needed to install shutters. If they were only installing half of them, so it wasn't tracked and it wasn't in the procedures. So the procedures, they will all. So this is just a really brief overview
So-
of what the entire process will look like.
So they
Again,
might-
we can.
So they might not be able to get a kitchen, but they could definitely do more flood-oriented improvements, is what you're saying.
Not to, oh, go ahead.
You're saying that I would not be allowed to do a kitchen
No,
if I was at that threshold? You would keep me from,
you would have to
the
elevate your
rules
home.
would stop me
Yes.
from doing a
Yeah.
kitchen?
You would
If
have-
I did all the solar and all the windows and all the shutters and built sandbag berms around my 10-foot high house, which is gonna flood anyway, then I still can't do a kitchen because it takes me over 50%?
If all of those other items, I'm sorry, were installed prior to this ordinance, and then you wanted to do, and you exceeded your 50% rule with all of, or you're at that mark of 50%, and your market value today that you show that this is it, so then yes,
That's the
you
way
would
the
have
law
to
is.
elevate the structure.
That's a bit draconian, isn't it?
So
That's how it's been here,
it's
so I
kind of-
think originally it was actually not the 15-year cumulative for the life structure of the home. So then in 2013, it was changed to 15-year cumulative. Again, there's also always an option to change that. It's a local, higher technical standard. Pinellas County, as I mentioned, they only have 1-year cumulative. A lot of municipalities have 5-year cumulative or 10. But depending on which one you select, you have number of points for your CRS. So if we want to get to that higher rating of class 3, so this is something that we're receiving points for currently, although the number of points is not that significant. So you have to look at the other items like,
So again, I do appreciate the, the education and the questions, because, I mean, even though what we're voting on today does not affect any of that at all, except for going forward, the person that already has done these and been proactive, to use your word, they might be at their threshold or close to it and not able to do some other home improvements, whereas the person that wasn't, the proverbial ants, so to speak, they can now have all of this excluded if they choose to do it. But the law, just like when the law changes, the people that were in jail for breaking a law that was changed, they don't get released.
we can
It's
double check with
not to be
the
flippant, but very
representative.
similar,
You're still telling me what I can and can't do in my home, if I can afford it, I mean,
No, you can do it, but then you have to elevate your home and do all the other flood things as
that's
well.
destroying the home.
So that you're going to put improvements, you got a $300,000 house in a $300,000 neighborhood, and you're going to put these improvements in your house, and these improvements are going to cost you $200,000. So now all of a sudden you have a $500,000 house in a $300,000 neighborhood.
Well, this is discussion where, I'm sorry,
Exactly.
point of order, we should
So, yes,
either.
thank you. I
do a
used that
motion
once
on this
before,
and-
but
and then-
thank you
then
for.
chew on this
Thank you
because-
again. Any other questions, comments? So
I have one question, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Just a quick one. So is that regulation tied to the property or tied to the property owner?
That regulation is tied to the structure.
So, but is it the owner or the property?
It is the structure itself, so if you
Okay,
sell
so that
the,
would be which one?
that would be the structure itself, because the
Okay.
ownership could change.
Agreed.
So, but we have a permit record for that particular parcel ID number, so we
Okay.
keep track record of the parcel, by parcel number. So if somebody sells that house, we still have a permit record of that, yes.
So if I sold it to Bob here and I had already hit 99%, then he would not be able to do his improvements?
Unfortunately, yes,
We are-
he would not be,
we have
yes.
definitely digressed here.
All right, well, I'm
Into lots of discussion.
I'm glad to understand it better. I think it's a step in the right direction, but I really hope the city council looks at when the city looks at making improvements a good, it's something that's supported by the city as opposed to something that is prevented.
Sure, and again, we're discussing this because we have the 15-year cumulative, so if we
Definitely
didn't have the
agree.
cumulative in
Is
place,
If there's any way to,
then we would still be limited to that 50% FEMA rule, but that would be on either annual basis, so the minute you finish, like Pinellas County, the minute you finish one project, you can pretty much start the new one. As long as you're still within that 50% of that current market value, then you will be looking at that market value, you wouldn't be counting percentages at that point, so.
I think a lot of good points have been brought up, though, and I do hope that council will review the discussion, and hopefully, if there are things that can be modified with the original as well, because coming in with this, I do think that it would make sense to take a look at possibly retrofitting in some way a person that has been proactive and done all of these things, and to the detriment of their new kitchen. And now this is, coming in for people that got their new kitchen, but now they get their, their exclusion.
Is this your opinion, or is this a
I'm just saying, I
question?
hope that council will look at that. I was just, kind
Well,
of.
what do you think about saying all these improvements that you do to harden your home against hurricanes, floods, et cetera, and so forth? What if you make all those exempt from the 50%?
Isn't that what we're saying?
I think that's what
That's what we're putting into place
Discussing.
going
Well,
forward.
but it doesn't read that way. It doesn't read that way, but that's not what it says to me. Because Tatiana just said a while ago, if you do a kitchen, et cetera, and you go up to, what do you say, $140,000, but you put in a $20,000 kitchen, you're over the 50% limit. So that sounds like, doesn't matter, this is included.
Isn't that what exclusion of cost is?
I read that. but-
Exclusion of cost from cumulative, so you will not be counting it towards the 15-year cumulative, but it is still subject to the 50%
Right.
rule.
Boom.
Right. That's where that.
And the
that's
50%
fine.
rule is not something that we locally enforce. This is a FEMA rule, FEMA 50% rule. So I think the reason behind that is because you don't
Yeah.
want to necessarily place those higher rated windows in an older home and not doing any other improvements. So you will have only windows left when the hurricane comes through. So it's very difficult. We have a unique situation here. So this is all sort of new to me because I've only been with the city as a CFM for 3 years. Obviously, these regulations, 1976 and 1992 is when we adopted the CRS higher regulatory standards. So it's been with the city in the community for quite some time now. So it seems like maybe we can do a workshop so that newer residents that are coming in here, they understand how the 50% FEMA works. We had the work session before, but the problem is residents usually are really interested in this when it affects their own home. So when they're thinking about doing a project, so then they learn all about the 50%, the elevation certificate, the cost of the insurance, and all of those other items. So how to make this so that a lot of people will be engaged when we produce these amendments. We can do probably a workshop, as we mentioned, in between this and the council meetings.
That might be a good idea. I mean, it is, just coming back to the item, the agenda item that we have here, it did seem very simple to me until I heard some of the discussion, and I appreciate that. And perhaps going into council, maybe something that makes it a little bit clearer. I hope that some of the comments that you've heard have helped you see, how you could present it where.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, it's exclusion of the cost from cumulative of those items that are strictly, the purpose of those items is strictly of the hardening of your structure and mitigation. Yep.
Okay. So the item, do I have a motion on CA 23-01? Or is there more discussion? I felt like we had a lot of discussion, so I kind
We
of,
have to discuss after the motion.
yes.
Well, I would like them just suggest the motion includes a recommendation to council that they revisit the way things are calculated. If it's, if there's a cost basis, then maybe a cost basis should be reset based on current market values. There should be some semblance of that factored in. And I say that because if I were selling the house to somebody and they found out they couldn't make improvements unless it's basically turned it into a demolition, then the value of my house would be worth a lot less.
Can you somehow word that in your motion?
Well, my motion would be, I'm stating this so that hopefully the council members are watching this and reflecting on it. But I would want the motion to say that, to show that this is a step in the right direction, but it certainly opens Pandora's box and brings light to a lot of issues that currently exist, and that would potentially affect property values. And with costs of improvements and materials going up substantially, and these numbers are just, if someone's grandfathered in because they did improvements and they're at 90%, then how do you change that 90% if you're not going to look at current market value? That doesn't seem right, if that makes sense.
So what's your motion?
So my motion is to approve the flood ordinance amendments and Florida Building Code technical amendment pertaining to floodplain management, and recommend that the city council and the city work on further amendments to encourage improvements as opposed to discourage them, and in order to allow people to maintain their property values.
Is there a second?
She's still writing John's amendment.
You would
I
say.
second.
Question. In Robert's Rules of Order, what is the procedure, I guess, if motion's on the floor and another member wishes to make a different motion?
You vote on the current motion. If it passes, it passes. If it fails, then you can make another motion, a different motion.
Okay, so if it passes, then I can't make my motion.
Correct, but it could, after you have discussion, it could be amended based on that discussion.
Okay, well, I'll wait then.
So add your discussion to the. Okay, so a motion's on the floor. Discussion? We there?
We seconded it, right?
Yes.
Right. Discussion. We've had a lot of that through the questioning and the back and forth dialogue. I'm kind of uncomfortable with it. Is Tatiana, I have another question for you. You don't really need to get up unless you need to answer it in the microphone and be recorded. Is there anything like this on the books right now? Is this new? Just a net new thing that we're doing here?
This is not new. This is actually an improvement to allow residents to install windows, to install other solar panels, to allow certain items, but still keeping the cumulative at 15. FEMA rule is still going to be in place. Cumulative, that's something that when I mentioned, that's something that we can discuss, and maybe that could be as a citywide amendment again, we could reduce that cumulative. That will help those people that installed something, for instance, 9 years ago, if we change it to 10, and they're at that 10-year mark, so they can do another project and they will start over. So that's when we're going to use the market value and the 50% again, and the clock starts again. So it could be reduced even further to 5 years, or it could be reduced to 1 year like Pinellas County. We're here only because we have the cumulative, but we're trying to make improvements. We're trying to make it easier for residents to actually have their home improvements in at the same time, hurricane hardening.
So prior to 2013, they could put that kitchen in even if.
As I mentioned, prior to 2013, we have, for the life of the structure, we had cumulative that was for the entire life of the structure. So all of the projects were counted when the project was built. if it was non-compliant, so we didn't have a mark. Everything for 20 years, 25 years for the life of the structure, everything was counted against.
Okay, thank you.
I've been in my house 42 years, and I guarantee you that I have put more than $58,000 into it since I've been there, and that's what I paid for it when I bought it. So I'm way over that limit.
So the maps changed when it was built, it was probably compliant. It's just
Yeah,
because in
yeah.
2021, the maps changed and a lot of those
Right.
homes, they became below the BFE. So at the same time, maybe we could look into that cumulative again, removal, or reduction.
My house is at 10 feet, it was compliant. Now it's
And
compliance is
that's, yeah,
13.
yeah. Yeah, well, my house is a 12 and a half, and up until this year, it was okay. But now all of a sudden, the back 3 feet of my property is now in the flood zone. So flood insurance wanted to, anyway, that's another story.
Well, how do we protect the citizen? Is there any, like, total negatives with this and to our citizens in our home? I mean, the point you made about if I gotta sell my house, I'm gonna have to, like, out of the, honesty in sale, you're gonna have to tell the guy, oh, by the way, you have no points, you know?
I'm seeing,
This doesn't, this doesn't hurt it. This helps those who
Haven't
Who
done
want-
anything.
or who want to do flood-oriented improvements.
On the point of BFE and the map changes, I did want to mention, because I neglected this earlier, if your home was previously compliant, we're not going, the maps hadn't changed since 2009, 2003, 2009, anyway. So if your house was compliant at that point, that wasn't being counted against you.
Yes, that's what-
You had no 50%, so for most of us, a lot, that just kicked in last year. So it's not, it's only been a year going thing to the point of our discussion earlier about people who had already used it up. There are some of those where they sat at 7 feet and they were below, and they've always been below. Not a huge number of those. But I am still, like, with the map changes, starting to run into a lot of the issues where they do want to do, windows are expensive, doors are expensive, garage doors are expensive, so they want to do these things, but they don't want to use up all of their cumulative that they're allowed to use for the future.
So and we would still have cumulative, but they would be excluded from those expensive items. They would be excluded from the cumulative. And that's a good point, Mandy, to bring that 2021. That's when a lot of,
that's how, I think I'm seeing it kind of the opposite of how you're seeing it as far as property value. Like if I've remodeled my house, put an addition on, and I've reached my 50%, but I didn't do anything with the windows. And now, like you were saying, it's tiring putting up those big plywood boards. So I'd like to replace the windows, but if I did that, I would be over. But this will keep me from going over. And doing that will increase my property value. So I think I'm seeing it on a flip side of what. Yeah, yes.
It can, I'm sure
Yeah.
that was the idea. Did you have anything else I thought you
No.
wanted to say? I mean, yeah, I think it can. I think that was the good intention behind the idea of this. Sadly, I think a lot of people look at kitchens more than they look at safety on the home. So, you know, it just depends on who your buyer is. But I think that what we're looking at today is whether we want to afford that, right, to someone. So you had amended that to say to look at other amendments that would be based on current market value. I don't know if those exact words were in there. Would you like to read the revised amendment back so that the board could hear that again?
Did you want the current market value in your motion? Because that wasn't how I had.
Just read it
Okay,
as it's
the
written.
way I understand it right now is you're recommending approval of CA 2301 with the recommendation that the city council and the city work on further amendments to encourage improvements rather than discourage them.
Perfect. I think that's fair.
So we're still in discussion. Did you have something that you wanted?
Well, what I was gonna do was make a motion to table the item. That's, and I think that, you know, till we can get more clarification or till somebody can, you know, because we've had so many questions. I mean, so many questions, so it's obvious that we're not savvy to what this really is, means and does. So I was gonna make a motion to table the item, but we've already got a motion on the floor right now, so.
Other discussion? Anybody else?
I think the way the motion's written, it makes it ambiguous as to what improvement would be that increases property value, as, like you were, between what I was saying and you
I
were
thought I
saying.
had heard, and I wrote down, based on current market value, the percentage based.
Well, it was
Correct.
it was a suggestion, but I think the way Kathy read it, what I'm saying is that this is a step in the right direction. Because if we table it, then people who want to put storm shutters tomorrow can't, or they're going to impact their cumulative. One of those two is going to be true. So if we pass this and city council passes it, then that enables them to do those kind of improvements without affecting their cumulative, without throwing them over that threshold and forcing them to do everything, which may prohibit them from doing anything. So I like that, and I just want to encourage the city and city council to look at other ways to allow people who've already been proactive and already done things and may be at a threshold to still be able to do things, as opposed to be impacted by it, especially if it carries over to a new property owner.
Anyone else? Okay, so I believe this is a roll call vote.
Right, okay. Board Member Cambanas? Yes, no?
Yes, in favor.
Board Member Harvey?
No.
Board Member Rembure?
Aye.
Board Member Sock?
No.
Board Member Roundhouse?
Yes.
Chair Oliver?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment CA 2301 with the recommendation to City Council and the city to work on further amendments is passed with 4 votes for and 2 against.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda, number 3, has been postponed. However, I'd like to call for public comment if anyone is here to speak on item 3, DA 23-01, Devin S. Rushnell LLC Development Agreement and Public Hearing. Is there anyone here that is here to speak on that item? Seeing no one, we'll move to item 4, selection of chair for 2023. Call for nominees for chair. Anyone want to?
Maybe keep it as is for now.
You were gonna say. As long as you could still sit to my left over here, I don't mind. I'll do it unless.
Didn't you say you're going to school and you missed meetings?
That's
That's why you didn't want to be the chair?
I was,
When you two were
I-
running for office over here?
I
before
kn-
the
I-
There's no
meeting?
running.
I
there
know
was
that-
Asking.
I know that the kind of the norm for this committee is that someone who's co-chair gets bumped to chair and has that opportunity, and that you're encouraging everyone to have those opportunities. Because I'm in school and I have to go out of town for school and sometimes for work, I was going to suggest that I not take that opportunity, although I would normally be honored to.
How about if I nominate myself for vice chair?
That'll work.
Because you go out, because of that whole reason.
I
I'll
think
do that.
that
I'll
feels
back you up.
good.
You'll
That's
back
it.
John up, I mean.
I'll back you up as vice chair if you're not here.
Oh, you'll back me up. Oh, okay.
That's
I
what the
thought-
vice chair does. You
well,
don't
I
show
misunderstood.
vice chair
I
or
thought
chair.
it was
Well, she hasn't been
chair
nominated
and
yet, has
you-
she?
Oh, well,
Huh?
Somebody
I see
nominate.
Well,
what
listen, when I was chair, I had it for what, 5 or 6 years, and every year, I nominate Harvey, I nominate Harvey, and I kept
I
saying
think the
no.
vice chair should sit next to the chair anyway, because you basically have been keeping me in line the whole time, so, I'm
That's
all,
why I don't want to be the chair.
I'm all
I've
for
done
it.
it.
You like to just sit to my left and tell me what to do, I love it.
It's cool that we already jumped to number 5.
I'm fine, I live close, it's not hard for me to get here, so it's fine.
Anyone want to maintain the status quo?
I like,
Going to nominate anybody
well,
besides
nominate
me?
Susan.
There you go. Susan's nominated. All
Second?
Second.
in favor?
All in favor?
All in favor? I'm still in shock. All in favor? Everybody say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
It's just really become a mess. All right, well, no, I'm actually sad that you're not able to, and I hope that when it rolls around next year, you'll be ready to go.
Oh, we can nominate him to, what,
No,
the
next-
chair?
No, next year.
Oh.
He said, hang
Well,
on,
it's his turn.
he's got a lot, he's got too much going on, I get it. All right, so, that concludes our meeting.
Vice chair.
We have to vote in vice chair. So
Yes.
vice chair,
We already have a nomination. I second that nomination.
who's nominated?
He was.
I nominated
what's-
myself.
What's who is his name? What is his name for the record here? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And thank you for being willing to do that.
Bad.
All right, so
I'm only in it
if
for the
there's
rubber
nothing else
chicken.
for us, this meeting is adjourned.